If you're just coming in, welcome to Potential Workforce's Under the Radar, finding untapped talent in IT and beyond. We're going to get started, and if you missed the beginning, there's always the recording, so no big deal. So welcome all to another webinar from Potential Workforce, where we hear from experts, employers, and self-advocates about their experiences and recommendations on how we can improve employment outcomes for neurodistinct professionals and improve the world of work in the process. I'm Dave Thompson. I'm Director of Strategic Programs for Potential Workforce, and I am super stoked to be here. We support companies in becoming more neuro-inclusive in a number of ways, including we support them in recruiting neurodistinct talent into specialized roles within those organizations that are truly walking the walk. Today's conversation is about today's labor market. Employers are struggling to recruit, hire, engage, and retain qualified talent. But what if we told you that your talent acquisition efforts were missing out on 25% of the population? Because meanwhile, neurodistinct professionals, us, several of whom are on the call today, right? We face a 30 to 40% unemployment rate, according to UConn Center for Neurodiversity and Innovation. So we'd like to help solve both of those problems. That's what we're going to be talking about today. Some housekeeping before we get started. The chat, the cameras, the mics for our audience members will be turned off just due to the size of the call. Please use the Q&A feature for questions, and we hope to get to all of them. If not, we're happy to follow up with any and all of you. And now I'm thrilled to welcome our panel and give you each of these subject matter experts a moment to introduce yourselves and share a bit about what brings you here today, if that's okay. So welcome, Trina Haynes. Hi, Trina.
Hello, Dave. How are you?
Good now. Good now. How are you?
Good. I'm good. So my name is Trina Haynes. I'm the founder of My Lady ADHD. I started My Lady ADHD right after I got diagnosed with ADHD in 2021. I was looking for other women who had ADHD because I didn't know that women had ADHD back then. I literally thought that only men had it. And so my goal was to find just a few other women to connect to. And I found around 200,000 of them. It's kind of what I like to say. I also am the founder of the My Lady ADHD podcast. I have a newsletter with a large amount of subscribers, and I feel really deeply connected to the ADHD community because of this. So I'm hearing their concerns, their issues, what's actually happening in the ADHD community. And yeah, it's led me here to talk about this very important subject. So thank you for the invite.
Thank you so much for being here. Next, we have our friend Thomas Woodhams coming from Manchester. Hi, Thomas.
Hi, Dave. Thanks for having me. Hope you're well, and hope everyone is doing okay. So my name is Thomas. I am a tech recruiter. I work for Reed. Have ADHD. Was diagnosed nearly 4 years ago. I'm an avid techie, data nerd. Anything tech related, and I've got my hands in it. So yeah, really sort of one of the sort of main subjects for myself is obviously just a bit like Trina, that ADHD is a sort of massive part for me, not just because I have it, but also trying to help other people come to light or help and support either pre-diagnosis or after, just offer my support that I can along the way.
That's great. So it is so cool, the kind of duality between Thomas and Trina here, because both of you have ADHD, correct? One of you is extremely techie, and one of you, Trina, may I say that one of you is not extremely techie?
You can say that. I will allow it.
Right, and so that's part of the point of our conversation today, because a lot of neurodiversity hiring initiatives have to do with tech, right? Are pretty specific to tech, but Trina and I have no business in tech. I just want to be very clear about that. And so that's why we're so glad to have Thomas on the call. And speaking of tech and all different kinds of brains, now Potentia CEO, Jeff Miller, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Dave. Great to be here and great to be with the panel. So as you mentioned, my name is Jeff Miller. I'm the CEO and founder of Potentia. I'm also a parent. And so the connection for me comes from my son, Charlie, who was diagnosed autistic when he was 6. I've also got a background in human capital. I've been fortunate enough to run a couple of companies and with a through line around recruiting and human capital and global talent acquisition and workforce management. So when Charlie became a teenager, I launched a research project really just as a dad to try and figure out. I realized that we were doing pretty well, and Charlie was really doing well in that kind of year-to-year approach within school. But I had to admit that, when I stopped and thought about, what life was going to be like for Charlie when he was 26 or 36, I had to admit that I didn't have a great picture of what that would look like. And that bothered me as a dad. And so the research project that I went on was really just in service of that and in service of Charlie. And some of the things that I learned were really the things that led us to found Potentia. I learned how big the population is, how fast growing the population is in terms of diagnosed cases of autism, but just neurodiversity more broadly. I learned about the amazing contributions that neurodistinct individuals are already making in the world of work, and yet that there are so many others that haven't been given that fair shot and that opportunity. And that's really the impetus that allowed us to create Potentia. And it's one of the reasons I'm so excited to be part of this conversation today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jeff. So moving into our topic, and first to cover the tech world again, Thomas, I'm so glad that you're involved, because as you said, you kind of cover all things tech, right? So as a tech recruiter, forgetting about neurodiversity specifically for a second, what are the biggest pain points that you see employers are facing in today's labor market?
Good question. I think the common sort of challenges that come up in recruitment, as anyone knows, if in the recruitment game, is that it's hard to get good people in general that really sort of incorporate the tech stack, the culture, and it's kind of coming to the points where like people want the best of the best, but sometimes that it's when it comes to the sort of job descriptions and the sort of conversations with the hiring managers, what sort of like the sort of perfect candidate look like won't actually be out there. It's kind of from a business's point of view. So what normally tends to happen is obviously educating businesses that there are these sorts of people out here, but it's actually kind of cutting down what they need, but this is exactly what they need, but cutting down some of the points that are actually in the job description or their sort of hiring roadmap. And it's kind of re-engineering people's brains, especially with hiring managers, to think more logically in the labour market, and especially in tech being such sort of number one sector in general. Without technology, nothing would be able to happen. These sorts of calls wouldn't be able to happen. So it's such a very competitive market, and obviously everyone's out to be the best for the best.
Right. So it's a rigid structure, right? And you want to kind of help companies manage expectations and break out of some of those rigid expectations.
Of course, it's one of them things where it's hard to, the expectations versus what they want can sometimes kind of be, right, we're sending candidates over. Personally, I think that would be a perfect match, but that's not maybe what the client wants at that period of time. So it is actually coming together with a solution, and obviously educating the hiring managers that this is a sort of more type of sort of profiles that you would want at that particular time. But obviously sometimes it is hard to actually do that. So what I normally tend to do is actually back up with data or actual solutions that would be able to help the business long term.
What's the most frequent kind of gap between the employers and those job descriptions and the candidates? Is it experience? Is it the fact that the candidates would need to be remote and they're looking for in person? What's something that just comes up over and over?
Oh, it's a really good question. I think for me, it's definitely around the sort of the tech stack. Like you could have a front end or back end dev, and they want two jobs in one. So that the challenge is to overcome the sort of the technical abilities that some of the businesses want. They kind of want the best of the best tech, the latest versions, and ideally sometimes that's the sort of kind of challenges that you will face, especially in such a challenging market.
Okay. I didn't know how to do my job before I started, just saying. Jeff, you have years of experience in staffing and recruiting, right? Can you speak to this as someone who keeps their ear to the ground as far as the labor market? What are some of the things that employers are seeing today?
Sure, and I would echo everything that Thomas said. I think it's spot on. And just to add to it, I would say the lack of ability to retain talent, poor retention numbers, which of course create more work for the recruiters. But what that does to businesses when they have a lack of retention, when they have high turnover, right? And you think about the cost to train new people, the knowledge drain, the impacts on your reputation as a business, and just that, you know, all of that work that all these additional new hires that you need to make as a recruiter, some of them coming, you know, not from growth but from attrition. It really puts businesses at a competitive disadvantage, and I think a lot of companies today have just sort of priced that into what they do, and it's an area where I think we all need to do better, because it really, as an employer, it really affects you quite negatively if you're not able to hold on to your good people.
Absolutely. And so meanwhile, Trina, as we said, neurodistinct professionals or job seekers are facing really high unemployment rates, and also, from what I hear, struggling to find work, to find their place within the world of work. I know I certainly did. So, Trina, you have a lot of followers and a lot of friends that are neurodistinct, right? So, as someone who a lot of these people look to for peer support, what are some of the common barriers that you're seeing between neurodistinct job seekers and meaningful work experiences and being able to contribute and solve this problem for employers, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the barriers start from the beginning. Overall, just the interview process can be really challenging for someone with ADHD. If it's like an overcomplicated application, that alone, just starting right there is a really big barrier for someone with ADHD. So that's one place to start. And another huge one that I hear all the time is just the overall stigma around ADHD, where people with ADHD in particular are very afraid to tell their employers that they have ADHD. It is a big fear. So there's like a closed door situation happening where they're not feeling comfortable asking for accommodations. They're not feeling comfortable, changing up the way that they work that works best for their brain because of the environment that they're in. A lot of employers look at ADHD as a weakness, and that comes across when you go to talk to your employer. And that is the biggest barrier that I see, is the amount of stigma that still is in the workplace, where employers are looking at it as a weakness and not a strength. And so I think one of the biggest things you can do here is just educate yourself as an employer about the strengths that ADHDers have, because those are things that you don't hear about. And I want to throw out there that there's a statistic out there that ADHDers are 300% more likely to be entrepreneurs. And there's a reason for that. One is they are struggling in the workplace, and two is they have all of the skills of leaders. They are leaders. They are creative people. And that is an asset to have on your team. And I don't think companies are utilizing that in the way that they should be.
Yeah. And I want to say, I mean, you have a lot of expertise and following within the ADHD community, and we don't want to pigeonhole ourselves to just talking about ADHD. It is a big coincidence that 3 out of 4 of us have ADHD on the call, but a lot of this is similar for all different kinds of neurodistinct differences, right? But I think you make a really good point about you said something about closed doors, right? Opening that door when you enter the world of work can be extremely challenging to neurodistinct people who oftentimes were raised on these presumed inabilities or lack of skills, limitations, rather than being encouraged to really explore what they're good at, what they're into, right? My boss is on the call. I hope that he could tell you that I have a lot to contribute to the world of work. Right, Jeff? Jeff? Yeah?
Yes, Dave. Yes,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Thank you. Right. And when I first entered the world of work, I really struggled to find what I was even interested in, what I was passionate about, etc. So when we're talking about rigidities within these job descriptions, as Thomas described, and we're talking about needing 5 years of experience in some software program that's only been out 4.5 years, right? It's really hard to line up those rigid expectations with some people who may have had to take their own squiggly path and may have had to take a little bit of extra time to get to where they are, and can totally contribute meaningfully within plenty of companies. I think that's really, really important. Thomas, what about you? Same question for you. So what do you see as some of the barriers between neurodistinct adults and filling these career opportunities that you're speaking about?
Yeah, kind of sort of echo some of what Trina said. It is the process, especially being in tech. It is normally a phone call, be a technical test, then it could be a competency-based question. And I think sometimes the barrier is that even sometimes for me, when you're seeing long job descriptions in general, and some of the wording could be shortened, which means the same answer, but there's sort of fluff around the words to make sure the sort of tone and voice matches that company. For me, even sometimes looking at it, I'm like, I wouldn't want to apply, just because when I get to sort of the application, you then have to fill out another form. No one sort of really in general likes filling out long forms, and then obviously you have to then put your experience in, then it's your qualifications. At that point, for me personally, and obviously speaking from the sort of candidate side, would put me off in general. But further to that, there is the contracts that we work here at Reed is obviously on civil service, and the good thing about that is that they are fair, open and honest. And what I've seen recently is that they do an unconscious bias where they're not having names, dresses, background. It's just purely based on the experience and merit. So that's kind of really good, and I love promoting that sort of side, because they have the adjustments in place, and recently done that sort of thing with a data campaign where someone says, any chance you can type the question out to me instead of actually asking me a question. So there is businesses that are doing it. Are they doing it enough? It's a separate, obviously, conversation that we'll probably have, but it's kind of making things a lot easier, or changing the wording which would actually benefit everyone. And sometimes these sorts of words even put me off.
Yeah. And are they doing enough of it? That's a good question, because that's the business that we're in, right? So Jeff, let's talk about that for a moment. When we're talking about solving this overall issue, improving the world of work and helping improve the labor market, and also improving employment outcomes for neurodistinct job seekers and professionals, what can we do about it?
Well, there's a lot. I think, and Trina framed it up really well, talking about sort of the different types of barriers that exist, and we talk about them, within Potentia, as sort of hard factors and soft factors. So soft factors, being things like misconceptions about the community, or bias that folks have, or just misconceptions about doing a neurodiversity hiring program and thinking that it's going to be really costly or really risky or really, any of those things, when in reality, these programs are really straightforward. We quick Potentia plug, we're in this space, right? And we work with companies, but they don't need to turn their businesses on its head to do this, right? But then you've got the hard factors, like how, interviews are done, how onboarding is done. That just isn't not only ND friendly, just isn't very accommodating of different people's ways of working, whether they happen to be neurodistinct or not. So I think that, understanding that there are some long-standing barriers there that are in place helps us to figure out what we need to do to knock them down. And it's really, it's about education, right? It's about educating yourself as a business owner, as a leader, as a manager, as an ally, to understand, number one, there's an awful lot of really compelling case data out there now about how successful and how much better companies run when they're ND friendly. There's also talking to the people within your organization, right? We always say, you know, lean in and talk to the people in your organization about their perspective on how the interview process went, how the onboarding process went, right? You want to be talking to and listening to people in your organization about all those things, whether they're neurodistinct or not, right? You need to listen to the best people in your organization, and as a leader, be thinking about, you know, where you can pivot. We use a couple of things. One of the kind of core principles that we talk about is keep the main thing the main thing. And we talk about that whether we're writing a job description or whether we're managing an individual. And we want leaders to think about this and think, okay, you know, this person may approach something a little bit differently. Mm-hmm. Is that essential to the job? You know, can we allow for that difference? We've got another one we use where we talk about what, why, and how, and where we say, as leaders, you want to be really clear on what you want to achieve and why you want to achieve it. But whenever possible, if you can leave room on the how, you'll be amazed what comes back, right? Then you know, and I practice this all the time as a leader, because otherwise I would be limited by my own abilities, which would be a scary thought for all the people that work for me, right? I hire really smart people. Let them be smart, let them be creative. And so if you've got something you want to achieve, you know, how they get there is often a wonderful area to explore for innovation. So there are a lot of things that you can do, but I think you know, looking at the outside data, looking at what other folks are doing, and then listening to your own people are probably the biggest two.
Absolutely, a lot there. Trina, your thoughts as someone kind of outside the space of neurodiversity employment.
I have a lot to add. I have a lot to add to that, Jeff. I love all of that. I think the biggest thing is that accommodations, I think employers think that they're going to be these big, massive changes that need to happen. And I know from my community specifically, like sometimes it's like earplugs, like I just need earplugs because this is a loud environment. Or sometimes it's like, can you just like, can I get an outline of the meeting that we just had? Like, or can you give me a deadline? Like that's how simple it can be. But I think the people that are struggling, that need accommodations, aren't feeling comfortable enough to ask for even a simple accommodation to that measure. And the people receiving the information, the employers, aren't leaving that door open to have that conversation. I feel like that is probably the biggest key. And I know I already, mentioned that before, but it's literally communication. And I think, Jeff, you touched a lot on that. And I love that. I think that's the biggest thing that I hear, is that the communication is just not there. I think employers think it's going to be this big, huge, massive shift that has to happen in order to accommodate people in the workplace. But it's just recognizing that we all have different brains and we all do things differently, but the outcome will be the same, most likely. It'll just be done differently. And I think that's great for a company. You don't want everybody to do things the exact same way, or you will not grow. So I think it's just recognizing like, hey, it's kind of an asset that this person wants to do it differently, because it could innovate us as a company. And so I think a lot of people in this community are innovators, and instead of like closing the door and not listening to the innovations, I think the door needs to be open to those discussions. And so that's probably the biggest takeaway that I would like to share here.
I agree with what everyone's saying, and I think that what I really like that you said, Trina, was something about how it's something as simple as what did you say? Earbuds? Earplugs, yeah. Right? Yeah. The difference between a meaningful day at work for me and a not meaningful day at work for me is like not having my headphones, or a quiet space to work or something like that. And two things happen usually when we get in the room with HR or managers or whoever we're speaking to at big companies that are clients. One, someone ends up feeling safe enough for the first time to raise their hand and say, I got diagnosed as autistic last year, or something like that, which is always really, really special. That's just a little braggy moment for us, because that's just really cool. The other thing that happens is someone raises their hand, blown away in the third week of our sessions or something, and says, this is all just really great stuff. Can we use this for everybody? Like things like normalizing the how, flexibility on how we get things done, things on communication and inclusive leadership and things like that. They say, can we use is this just for neurodistinct professionals and new hires, or can we use this for everyone? Can I use this for myself? And that just shows such an obvious return on investment for employers to think about neurodiversity when they're thinking about everything from job descriptions, recruiting, sourcing, interviewing, hiring, the whole employee life cycle, right? Because it's a win-win. Everybody benefits.
Yeah. And Dave, I kind of want to add to that is what I've seen is usually when one person feels comfortable enough to have that conversation at work and to say, I'm autistic, I just got diagnosed with ADHD, that alone, if it's received properly, will open the door for your other employees to come through and talk about what they're struggling with as well, which will just help solidify the trust in your company. So usually it takes one person to come up and say like, hey, I have ADHD. I'm really struggling. I really could use a quiet work environment. I really could use a little bit of flexibility with my schedule. And if that's received properly, more people will say, hi, I'm also really struggling. And you will get so much more out of your employees by just leaving that door open again.
Yeah.
I love that. Can I jump in here?
Yeah.
I think I love that comment. I think one of the things that we try to really lean in on is that idea of vulnerability, and especially with our leaders being able to share something about themselves. And it doesn't necessarily need to be a diagnosis, although it could be. It could just be an area of struggle. Dave, I'll pick on Dave for a minute. Dave doesn't like spreadsheets. And he will say, listen, I can do a lot of things, but Jeff, if you want me to work on spreadsheets, I'm terrible at it. I don't like doing it. I don't, and so why am I going to have Dave do spreadsheets, right? But it could be something else about, an area of struggle, got a, an elderly parent at home, and boy, it's really kind of it's a lot for us as a family right now. And so if I seem a little bit tired, we're or whatever it is, right? Just leaning into that, I think is so important for leaders to create that environment for folks, because we know disclosure is a very personal decision, right? But we don't want people to feel like they can't disclose for fear of stigma. That's always a bad thing.
But that is what's happening. I mean, that is the reality in companies. And I have, a very deep connection to this community, and there is still a very strong stigma. People are very uncomfortable talking about even having ADHD. And honestly, in my world, we actually don't encourage people to say, hi, I have ADHD. We encourage, hi, I need accommodations. Like maybe that is the conversation that should be happening. I don't know, but that's kind of what is the next step, I think, is like, instead of coming out and saying, I'm autistic, I have ADHD, it's like, hey, yes, I don't like spreadsheets. Yes. It's going to take me so much longer to do spreadsheets. But guess what? I'm great at webinars. Give me the webinars. Like, I will run them and like make them amazing. So like looking at the strengths, and instead of giving employees all of the tasks that they really don't like really kind of catering a role towards their strengths. Like that is the best thing you can do for your company overall, is to look at your employees' strengths and to just embrace those, because that is what's going to move the needle.
Jeff taught me a saying that we use all the time, which is learn the lessons, lose the label, which means in the end, first of all, I shouldn't have to show you my autism or dyslexia or ADHD card to get some empathy, flexibility, and understanding from my employer, right? And second, it doesn't matter what my neurotype is or how my brain is wired. If I'm telling you it's probably not in the company's best interest to give me payroll, does it matter? does it matter why? Probably not, right? It doesn't. And so we should just normalize being able to be vulnerable and share our needs and share our strengths and explore those, right? I do just want to say, I've been in this space for a long time, and I'm lucky to work in somewhat of an echo chamber. So today I'm completely, I disclose within the first 30 seconds of meeting anybody. I think that it's really exciting. In only 2019, I had been in this space for a long time, and I gave a TEDx talk about embracing neurodiversity, which was a thrill for me. I did so, and I gave a 14-minute talk without ever happening to mention that I'm neurodistinct myself. That is how stigmatizing disclosing that you're neurodistinct at work can be. And I was working at a mission-driven company, and nothing against them. I was advised against sharing it a long time ago, never shared it again. And then the following month after giving that talk, I met Jeff at a big conference in 2019 for the Neurodiversity at Work Roundtable, which I've been involved with a long time. And someone from the federal government, from the Department of Labor, got up on stage and said, "Hi, I'm whatever. I have ADHD. I'm here to talk to you." And I said, "Wow, he's working for the Fed and he's sharing his neurotype." And then somebody else got up on stage and said, "Hi, I'm not neurodivergent in any way, but I am a recovering alcoholic." And I said, "Okay, that's not the focus of this conference, but that's really cool." And somebody else said, "I have a prosthetic leg." And, everyone was sharing. And that was the moment that I felt safe enough to start talking about my own my own brain at work. And the difference between the before and the after is massive. That was such a pivotal, if there was a biopic about my life, that would be the moment.
Dave, I think I told you this before. I had 50,000 followers on social media before I felt comfortable telling my employer that I had ADHD. I was more comfortable telling 50,000 people than telling my employer. That is still very, very real. So I think that's probably like one of the biggest issues, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're talking about here, is that people are not comfortable disclosing because of the reaction that they're getting from employers. I'm very grateful that Jeff was a different way in this situation, and you're kind of embedded in this world, but there's still this very large world over here where there is so much stigma. And I myself have been there. I applied for a role as a like a blog writer, content writer, and they wanted me to send writing samples, but they asked that I exclude all of my ADHD writing samples because they thought that it would look bad to the employer. So this was like a month ago. So this is still happening. So that's, I feel like if anybody takes anything from this, it's just to educate yourselves about ADHD, the strengths, and to have an open door where if someone comes to you and says, "I have ADHD," it is not a fearful conversation for that person, because that's a very brave moment that they've taken time to come to you and trust you with that information, knowing that they could get fired or they could not get promoted. This is a very vulnerable moment for someone with ADHD or autism to come to their employer, and it needs to be respected and treated that way.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I feel like we should have a whole nother webinar about disclosure and psychological safety in the workplace and things like that, because this is really incredible. But to kind of bring it back to neurodiversity and employment and the interactions between employers and neurodistinct candidates and job seekers specifically, there are some really awesome programs. And around 10 years ago, these programs started popping up at incredible companies like EY and Microsoft and Google, and we are very much a part of that at Potentia. We help some of the world's largest organizations in becoming more neuro-inclusive through ND hiring programs. That said, most of these programs are focused around IT. And so this question is for Thomas. A lot of people, when they think of ADHDers or autistic professionals, or especially when they think about these programs, they think of STEM and IT roles, right? Why do you think, as coming from Trina and I, who again have no business in IT, why do you think that is? Why do you think that there tends to be a lot of focus in the IT space for neurodistinct professionals?
I couldn't wait to answer this question. So from myself, it's kind of like, it's like a different world. You're coming away from work, which effectively is tech, but you're coming up with, like, for example, I'm massively into my data. Data never ends. So once obviously you feel like you can complete it, you can't, because you're coming up with, and obviously coming back to having ADHD and being creative, you're coming up with different solutions. You can use the data, you can engineer it in different ways. You can connect it to a massive chess player. So I can build an API into chess.com. Suddenly I'm downloading all the data. I'm looking at all the historical games where I can change it. And that takes pretty much 24 hours because I'm literally zoned in onto that. And I think with tech in general, it kind of lets people have the freedom to kind of be creative, but also come up with like dream ways of doing things, actually seeing like reality in a different way. It's like using like computer games, for example, which I have seen in like the metaverse, where people are autistic or neurodistinct are becoming a sort of taking away from real life and going into the metaverse to be able to sort of talk to people, become someone who they are. It's also helping with autistic, with language. It's like the endless possibilities that people can do with tech. So I think in general, it's that creative side, and I love data, and I've seen some of the best candidates that are actually autistic or have got dyslexia, got PhDs in data science or engineering. So, and obviously going back to the other, as you're talking with Trina, but these are people that are in really high professional roles, or should we say like C-level, but don't want to tell anyone. So, but the productivity is through the roof, and they're coming up with different queries and data models that would blow anything out of the way. And yeah, I think for me, it is definitely to take me away from my sort of not life, but put me in, like plug me into the matrix. That's probably the best way to put it. And then suddenly the endless possibilities and building things and that creative side always comes back. And as I said, with tech, it's an endless goal. You can always chop and change it and keep doing it. So that's sort of what stimulates me in the tech space.
Well, now I want to be in the tech field. That sounds exciting.
I'm a little jealous too. And I've worked with hundreds of neurodistinct job seekers and professionals over the years, and a lot of them happen to have that kind of tech-minded brain. So while I want to remind everyone that we're not a monolith and not everyone is techie, I've also seen some incredible innovations happen. I've seen patents developed, and I've seen hundreds of millions of dollars saved at companies annually, thanks to the inputs of neurodistinct professionals, right? And I've also seen, on a more personal level, this be very, very liberating to a lot of people, where it's kind of there. Like, I've had clicky moments in my story where I've realized, I'm really good. I like putting together slide decks. Like, I like audio visual, I like editing video, I like research, and this kind of works for me. Like, I kind of get this, I like communications. And so I've seen that happen, where whether it's someone that's just in vocational training, that's early off in their career journey, and happens to love video games, and not only love video games, but can compete on like an international level playing video games, and then like leverages that experience into some sort of a STEM related role, or someone who's just a math whiz who takes that and runs with it. But we have to encourage people to follow their own path and explore what they're good at and what they'd rather not pursue, right? And so computers isn't for me. And that said, Trina, this question's for you. Why is it important that companies don't limit themselves to IT when they're talking about neurodiversifying their business, right? When they're talking about proactively thinking about neurodiversity within their companies, and maybe even recruiting neurodistinct professionals within their companies? Why is it important not to just pigeonhole ourselves into one area?
Sure. Well, I am not a tech person, and I'm a fantastic employer. So I'll give you that right there. Employee and employer. I'm an entrepreneur. I think, from my community of just, mostly ADHDers, I run into people who are, yes, really in the tech industry. And that's, a huge portion of my audience is in the tech industry, but they're also teachers. A lot of them are teachers and in public, like public relations roles or communications roles, anything where they're problem solving on the fly and getting to be creative and innovative, like having the freedom to be creative and problem solve on their own. So that those skill sets can be used in every single role in the company. I mean, it is not limited to tech at all. I mean, you do need a problem solver in almost every single department that you have. Most likely a critical thinker, a very quick thinker, and somebody that can be innovative and creative. You need that in every team. You want someone like that on your team, depending, it doesn't even matter which department you're in. So I think I am, around a very wide audience of people specifically with ADHD, and not all of them have a tech background. A lot of them have a lot of skills to bring to the table. And most of them are kind of around that quick thinking, creative energy, where they can work independently, but also with some guidelines in place, some guardrails, as we were talking about earlier, Dave. I think it's kind of not smart to pigeonhole yourself to just the tech industry right here with this group of people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think that when people think, everyone has unconscious bias or ideas around a word when they hear a word. So when they hear autistic, they might think of their nephew, or, who has very particular characteristics, or they might think of a certain movie or something like that, right? But to be clear, I know autistic people who are lawyers, who are scientists, who are stand-up comedians, and I know ADHDers who are also doctors, scientists, pilot, so the range. Sometimes I hear or see questions written online about like, oh, my son is 15, he has ADHD or he's autistic. What's a good job for him? Like, what's a good job for any that you might as well take the diagnosis or the difference out of that question and just say, what's a good future job for my 15-year-old? I have no idea. Right? Jeff, could you speak to that a little bit?
Well, yeah, we get that question from employers all the time when they want to work with us. And they say, great, got it. Okay, understand the business benefits, but what kind of roles, right? So first of all, and just to add on, I think Trina really nailed it, but I would say, two things. Limiting it to IT is bad math, number one, okay? Because we're talking about 25% of the population in the US alone. That's 82 million people. It's an incredibly diverse group. I can just tell you anecdotally, within our database of ND talent, we have more non-STEM candidates than STEM candidates, let alone just IT candidates, right? So incredible, diverse group of skills and experiences and interests. And probably the best salesperson that I've ever worked with happens to be someone who's autistic, right? And there's anecdotal, examples all over the place. It's also bad strategy, again, to Trina's point, because if you're talking about people who think differently and who problem solve in really creative and innovative ways, like a lot of folks in our community do, why wouldn't you want someone like that working in your marketing department, crafting messages to help you to beat your competition, or any number of other areas? There's so many. There's a limitless number of examples of not just where people can work, but where they are working today successfully, right? And the data's out there. If you're not sure where to look, reach out to any of us. But yeah, it's just it's bad math and it's bad strategy. IT is great, but you need to think beyond IT for sure.
Yeah, honestly, I feel like if you have a department that's like stale, like stuck and not moving forward, not growing, I'm just saying, I'm just saying,
Probably good.
I would look at adding a problem-solving, innovative, creative thinker to that team and see what happens.
Yeah, I really think of, and it's important to remember, you know, these terms are used really loosely, but neurodiversity is all of us, right? Everyone makes up part of diversity, biodiversity, diversity, neurodiversity, right? And so all neurotypes are important. And I almost think of it as like the Ninja Turtles, how there's like a silly one and a really serious stoic one and a adventurous one, or the Backstreet Boys. There's like a naughty one and a creative one and a, right? Like, it is to your benefit to ensure that you have a literally neurodiverse workforce. No leader has ever said, you know, we're all going to need to put our heads together and think the same exact way to solve this very unique, never seen before problem.
Right, Dave,
right?
but they're not saying that out loud, but that is the action that is happening in the workplace. That is actually what's happening, is that they want everyone to be the same, and then they're curious why they can't get employers and why they can't grow. And that is the key here, right? Is that you need all types of brains in your workplace.
Mm-hmm. And that's where a lot of that kind of copy paste culture, not just within the job description, but the job description and beyond, you know, your rigidities within your requirements and beyond, what it looks like to contribute to a company, especially bigger companies, because, you know, it's streamlining it doesn't go without its challenges. I am sympathetic, right? But that's where we kind of get into that stuff. Like, there are people that can, if Jeff had written out a job description and posted it on Indeed and I found it, I very well may have self-selected out of that job description, because there may have been things on there, like spreadsheets as a really easy example, that I had no business doing, right? And one of my favorite things to do is to tell huge companies that I've already, quite frankly, kind of impressed, or they like me, these decision makers at these companies. I say, just to let you know, I'd never apply here. You know what I mean? Because of this kind of rigid copy paste thinking when it comes to what it means to be a qualified candidate, what it means to participate meaningfully. Meanwhile, again, all of us have plenty to contribute.
But see, Dave, if you make it through that first, if you see the application and it says spreadsheets and you say, you know what, I'm going to apply anyways, and you go to step 2 and the application process is ridiculous, if it is 4 pages long and they want to know your dog's name and every single thing you've ever done, and then the interview process is 3 or 4 interviews long, I mean, you're basically weeding out all of the people that you want on your team. Because if you want someone to fill out forms for a living, that's how you should structure your application process.
Right.
So, I mean, I think that is a huge hurdle here, is just like from the very beginning, I think it's the application process and looking at the way that you're writing job descriptions and looking at the actual process and seeing if that alone could be weeding out great candidates for you.
I agree. Sounds like we have plenty of feedback for employers, and plenty of advice for employers. To move on to our last question, and then hopefully we can get to a couple of audience questions. Thomas, I have my timer here. That's one of my success enablers that I use to keep track. It has 40 seconds left, so I'm early. Oh, there's Trina's timer. Hi. So I'm going to give you a minute, if that's okay. Is that all right? So if you had 1 minute to address job seekers, neurodistinct job seekers, today, in today's labor market, what do you want to tell them? What do you want to say? No pressure, but 60 seconds on the clock. Okay?
Yeah, okay, I'm ready. Tell me when.
Ready?
Yeah.
Go.
Okay. I think for me, for neurodistinct people in general, is just be yourself. I think any business that wants to adapt and have the adjustments, it's definitely a chance for you just to be yourself that will actually embrace you for you. I think as well, being online, I think you should show, I'm going on to LinkedIn now, but from my perspective, is actually be creative on LinkedIn, have a look at your profile, use the featured stuff. If you're in tech as a whole, put some of your work in there, put some of them like fantastic projects that you've been working on, like Dungeons and Dragons, and that's kind of stuff that you're into, and really showcase that, because a lot of people are scared to kind of, when they are being looked in the corporate world, that they're scared to actually show some of their hobbies or some of the things they're working on. So I think for me, it would actually just be yourself and start showcasing some of the projects and be proud of the stuff that you build, because some people can't do that sort of stuff. So it's your kind of superpower to do and shine through. So that's kind of the stuff that I've done, and that's worked for me. And if anyone needs anything, then let me know.
Time's up. Really
Nice,
well
Josh.
done. Did you have your own time? Did you have your own timer?
I was just hearing it in my head that I was sort of going by 1, 2, 3 whilst talking. So it's kind of like a maths sort of solution.
I call that dual focus. I call that dual focus. I don't know if it's a thing, but sometimes I can listen to like 3 podcasts at once. I don't know. Excellent. I do want to say, shameless plug for Potentia. We have our NDTC, our Neurodiverse Talent Community. That is an opportunity for you to throw us your resume if you're a neurodistinct job seeker, or just have opportunities for whether you're happy in your role and you're employed, or you're looking for something, opportunities for peer support, to gain tips, resources, etc. A great way to get in touch with us and participate in our ND Voices campaign, which seeks to amplify and elevate the voices of neurodistinct professionals and job seekers. So check that out, the NDTC on potentialworkforce.com. And so, Trina, I have my timer here. Oh, do you want to use your own timer? You could use your own.
No,
Okay.
you go ahead.
All right, I'm going to use my timer. So same question for you. You only have a minute. What do you want to tell all of the neurodistinct professionals and job seekers in the world? Ready? Go.
Sure. Something I'd like to tell all the job seekers out there is to really take a deep dive into your strengths and to really look at what your strengths are. And then when you go to interview and you go to apply for jobs, to talk about maybe some small accommodations that you might need. So maybe look at what the accommodations are, like earplugs, like we were talking about earlier, and mention those in the interview. And then if the feedback isn't great during the interview, do you really want to work there? I'll keep it brief.
Oh, wow. So Jeff, I'm going to give you her extra 25 seconds. So you have 1 minute and 25 seconds.
Okay. As you know, I could fill that up quite easily.
Yeah, there you go. So same question for you, but geared towards employers, as someone who has been an employer of many and has worked with employers for many years. If you had 1 minute to explain or teach all employers something, what would that be? 1:25 on the clock.
1:25. Okay, I'll do my best. Number one, I think, and we've touched on a lot of this today, right? Understanding just how big and how impactful this population is, and yet how many businesses are missing out on this population. Number one. Number two, I would do some listening. I would listen to your people. I would listen to the case data that's out there about how other companies have become more inclusive and have become better businesses as a result. You don't need to turn your business on its head to do this. They're relatively simple but specific things that you can do. And then number three, take action. I think you need to look at your business with a critical eye. Look at those areas where you're probably not accessing the many talent pools out there that could benefit your business. And if you are, you probably have some processes in place that are impeding your ability to get full access and fully leverage the amazing talents that these folks have. And like I said, it's not rocket science. These are specific things that you can do, and they'll make your business so much better in the process.
Excellent. You had 15 seconds left on the clock. Very good. Very cool. So I think we have time for about one question, and I'm gonna take the first one that came in, and this is for anybody. What are ways employers can learn how to respond to employees that do disclose? And to add to that question, how can we encourage? We don't want to force disclosure, right? But how can we encourage an environment that's conducive to people disclosing? Is what I would add. But their question is, how should they? What can they do to learn how to respond to disclosure at work?
I would say just really listening and kind of maybe asking, like, well, what are you struggling with? What do you think would help here? and then figuring out if that's feasible in your organization, if there's like some workarounds that you can come up with together, and really just asking, what do you think would help you here? And then, if even better is to maybe have like a network within your office of other people that might be struggling. I know there's some other companies out there that have communities within the company where people can feel comfortable talking about this with other people that are going through the same thing. So maybe just listening and coming up with solutions together to issues that, for issues that they might be having, such as spreadsheets. Maybe Dave shouldn't be doing spreadsheets. Let's give that to someone who loves spreadsheets and give Dave more of the work that he does love so that he's productive as he can be.
And I would just add, I think it can be a great launching point to lean into strengths and work preferences as well. And are you doing the type of work that you really love to be doing? How could we, are the things we could be doing as an organization to help support you being able to tap into those strengths even more, right? So that it is and I know Trina's talked about strengths first a bunch today, so I'm borrowing from her previous comment, but I think there's an opportunity there to both meet people where they are and address challenges, but also really encourage folks to express the areas where they work best and where they're in flow and they're most fulfilled in what they do. And what a great opportunity to have that conversation with an individual on your team.
Absolutely. There's one more question. I hate to miss out on these questions, so we'll contact you all individually. We got some great ones, but the next question was, what things do we need to know or do in order to launch an ND hiring program? In like a minute or less. Jeff, could you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. Give me that one more time. What's the question?
The question is, what things do we need to know or do in order to launch an ND hiring program?
I think, and we've talked about it a little bit in my last answer, right? You first, you need to have the willingness to do it. So you've already done step one. You need to talk to people within your organization, listen to the people in your organization. If some folks will have an ERG or different, groups that support different individuals, they need to have a voice in anything that's done that involves them, right? That's absolutely critical. And then, like I said, there's tons of data out there about best practices and ways that other people have worked. There are firms like Potentia. There are other good companies out there that can help you along this journey. But if you're starting from a good place and you're starting from a listening place where you're really leaning in to understand and try and meet the needs of your current employees and create a better environment for them, that's a really good place to start. And then there are other additional wealth of resources beyond that you can tap into.
Agreed. Well, I hate to end it. I could go for another hour. I don't know about you guys. But that will have to conclude our panel for today. Huge thank you to Trina, to Thomas, to Jeff. Thank you so much for being a part of it. And I hope we could do it again. I maybe next week. I really had a good time. And thank you to all of you who have tuned in from around the globe. We look forward to having conversations like these and to amplifying the voices that need to be heard so desperately within this realm. If you're not following us on social, please do that. Sign up for our newsletter, and you can get a copy of this webinar, and feel free to get in touch if you'd like to chat more about our services, or we missed one of your questions today. We're happy to talk to you anytime. So thank you so much, and we'll see you next month. Thanks.
Bye. Thank you.